What is organized crime? Organized crime, according to the Encyclopedia Britannica, is comprised of highly centralized enterprises set up for the purpose of engaging in illegal activities. Such organizations engage in offenses such as cargo theft, fraud, robbery, kidnapping for ransom, and the demanding of protection payments. The principal source of income for these criminals is the supply of goods and services that are illegal but for which there is continued public demand, such as drugs, prostitution, and gambling. The Los Angeles crime family was organized around a hierarchy headed by a boss, who ruled with absolute authority and received a cut of every money-making operation taken on by any member of his family. Second in command was the underboss, and below him were the capos, who each controlled a crew of soldiers. This hierarchy was very essential to gangs. Joseph Ironman Ardizone, as pictured, was the first boss of the Los Angeles crime family. One of the most notorious gangsters of the Los Angeles organized crime era was Mickey Cohen. In the world of gangs, the higher up in the hierarchy you are, the bigger you are as a target. Many gang members would get seriously injured or even die during disputes. Here is Mickey Cohen in a hospital bed after being engaged in a dispute where he was shot. Much corruption occurred between the Los Angeles Police Department and gang organizations in the area. Being a gang member and being a part of the Los Angeles crime family was risky business. Many gangsters were put in jail for their crimes, assaults, and even for just being associated with a gang. John Roselli, also known as the Silver Fox, controlled the Hollywood and Vegas Strip and had strong connections to the Los Angeles crime family. Joseph Dumas was rumored to be one of the many to come forward as the killer of Elizabeth Short in the 1940s. The killing was thought to have been caused by those affiliated in gang activity, and the crime is still left unsolved, remaining as one of the most mysterious cases in United States history. A year following the murder of Elizabeth Short came forward a man confessing to the killing. The LAPD thought they had caught some relief after a year of unsuccessful investigation. Although gangs consisted of people of all races and ethnicities, the most well-known gangs consisted of African American and Hispanic backgrounds. This was due to the migration that occurred during the early 1900s and the racism that came along with it. The stream of African American immigrants migrating to the West came in two waves. The first wave occurred between 1915 and 1929, and the second wave occurred between 1940 and 1950. These immigrants were simply searching for a better life, but when they arrived in the West, they were greeted with institutional inequality in housing, education, and unemployment. Specifically in African American gangs, formation was influenced by racial intimidation, school and residential segregation, extreme marginalization, and racial exclusion from mainstream Los Angeles. Black residents challenged these inequalities, and this led to violent clashes between white social clubs and black clusters of youth, or gangs. Fear of attack from whites was what led to the early formation of black gangs aimed at protecting black youths against white violence directed at the black community. The first period of gang growth in Los Angeles began in East LA in the 1940s, in communities that were largely Hispanic. The Mexican American families were not widely accepted, and many kids formed these groups to protect themselves from conflict with other groups in youth, in other neighborhoods, school officials, police, and other authorities. These groups of kids stood out. Some identified as gangs, but others were labeled this by their enemies, or the people they were trying to protect themselves from. Gang subculture provided a means of social adjustment or adaptation for marginalized youth. The earlier boy gangs were now transformed into street gangs in a ritualized street baptism. They were extremely territorial of their barrios, defense of the barrio, and fighting for one's homeboys. For the honor of both was their code of honor. They sprayed graffiti to mark their territory and fought other gangs. The intense bonding to their barrios and code of honor in the gangs was unique to the Los Angeles era. Zoot suits were a popular style during the 1920s that included an oversized jacket with wide shoulders and baggy pants that narrowed at the ankles. It was typically accompanied by a wide-brimmed hat. The style began in Harlem but eventually traveled west. It was introduced into California by the El Paso Mexican Street Gang. By 1943, Zoot Suiters were seen as a dangerous group. They attacked vulnerable white women and were responsible for multiple local homicides. During a 5-day period, military personnel and citizen mobs chased and beat anyone wearing a zoot suit. This was later called the Zoot Suit Riots. During the 1930s, there was an exponential decline in deaths among Mexican gangs in Los Angeles, whereas in most black gangs, the death rate significantly increased. Crimes in the 1940s that proved pivotal in the development of Mexican-American gangs in the Southwest were the Sleepy Lagoon murder and the Zoot Suit Riots. In 1942, a young Mexican-American boy was killed at this popular swimming place in East Los Angeles. Members of the 38th Street Gang were arrested and charged with murder. These gang members continued to show pride for their gang in prison and continued to recruit members behind bars. The Zoot Suit Riots were another historic event that shed light on Mexican-American gang members in Los Angeles. Mexican-American gangs began in the 1940s. During this time in history, African Americans and Mexicans were allies with each other in the struggle against discrimination. By the 1950s, gangs had grown, become stronger, and were more organized. As time went on, white clubs started to fade, but gangs did not disappear with them. They began to engage in conflicts with other black gangs.